I'm trying to. I love doing that. She does. Hello, everyone. I'd like to bring to order the Planning Commission meeting for November 19th, 2019. Present is Harold Watson, Commissioner Watson, and Commissioner Vigliotti, and myself, along with the town planner, and of course our secretary. First thing is approval of minutes for September 17th and October 22nd.
I move we approve the minutes from September 17th and October 22nd.
Okay, so we have a motion by Mr. Watson. You sure? You're it. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. So I guess that's unanimous, so we can move on. Zoning referrals?
There is no referrals, but I just have an update to what was sent to Zoning Commission last month. We had two text amendments that we worked on that we sent to the Zoning Commission. One was on the parking calculations, section 12, and the other is on digital signs. The digital signs ordinance has been, forwarded for review to the town council, and with respect, not yet, and I think it may be on the council agenda in the coming meeting. And with respect to section 12 on parking calculations, they voted on it. The zoning commission adopted the proposed revisions to parking, except for two sections, section 12.5.18 and 12.5.19, which looked into elementary, middle, and high school parking. And the zoning commission requested the planning commission to study further impacts and rationale for adopting such regulation for schools. So that's why they did not vote on those two subsections of section 12.
Mr. Watson?
Could we direct our planner to pull together the existing parking lot and the capacities, and also how many adult people they have working at each of those locations? That should be easy to get from the Board of Ed, I would assume, so that we can then actually look and see, because we're still limited by what's there now. We're not going to be putting in new parking lots or taking away parking lots.
I might be able to help that that I'm on the planning for the Board of Ed, and they just did a study on each of the schools, so I'll send you a copy of it.
Yeah.
So that might be what you're looking for.
Great.
Okay, we'll do that. Anything else on zoning referrals?
That's it.
Okay, there's no campsite plan review, there's no 824 review. Any reason to discuss section 5.3 of the zoning regulations concerning housing?
I'm reaching out to several people to see if we can fund a workforce housing study for the town that would lead into a regulation amendment eventually, and allow multifamily workforce housing at select locations in the town.
Okay. Hearing.
Thank you.
Okay. Erosion sediment control plan,
There's
nothing?
nothing.
No bond request? Moving right along. The implementation plans, we have extended an invitation to Linda Pepin, who indicated she would be here tonight, but not knowing exactly what our agenda would be at that time, which was in October. She may be coming a little later on, so we'll just wait and see, and then take up the Greenway at that time. Is that okay with everyone? Okay. What?
May I ask if we have any Greenway people here?
It's the most people I've ever seen, but no, I guess not. Okay, anything on complete streets?
Actually, yes. Just this afternoon, I received comments from DOT on the preliminary designs for complete streets that we have sent to them for review. And they had few comments on, the angled parking by the town center, and they had comments on if we are reaching out to Metro North, because Metro North has a significant role in the along Main Street because of the train station. So we are trying to address those comments, and I will be reaching out to the team. Actually, I reached out, and I'm going to set up a meeting with them and see how we can move forward with these comments, responses.
On the angled parking in the center of town, I thought we removed the angled parking.
We thought of, then we were not sure because based on the previous studies that were done for transit-oriented development along Main Street in the town center, the town still needs commuter parking, and there is a shortage of commuter parking, and we are still not sure if we would want to take out the angled parking unless we provide alternative parking for those at the town center, because we don't want the businesses to suffer.
Now, the angled parking at one point was right now it's you pull in
Yes.
to the angled parking. At one point, the plan called for angled parking in that you back in. In other words,
Yes,
you pull up
and
you back in.
right now we are also exploring the option of whether we should change the angle of the angled parking in a way that you can actually see the cars and bikes behind you. And, there are so many discussions going on still because it's still so preliminary. And ultimately, we want to do what is in the best interest of the town as well as the businesses that are there.
Question?
Mr. Watson.
The parking, the greenway that runs by there, is it closer to the current businesses or on the opposite side, the roadway side of the cars?
There were two iterations, and one, it was towards the outside. On the other one, it's like they wanted to eliminate angled parking and just put the bike lane through that. Now, we're thinking, maybe we should go back to the first version if we can't figure out an alternative parking. So the consultant said he would go research and come back with a potential solution that can be addressed safely if we are not removing the angled parking, because DOT has concerns in removing the angled parking as well.
May I just make a snarky comment? In my 3 or 4 years working on the Greenway, we have gone back and forth from one alternative to the next. We keep saying we're going to do this, and then 6 months later we go, no, we're going to do that. They're the same two alternatives. So the notion that we're going to go back and reconsider what was in the original plan still doesn't solve the problem that caused us to change it from the original plan. So it just seems to me a example of futility, and it's one more thing that's going to keep us from having any kind of built greenway. We're now going on 3 years, I think, for this greenway in order to get it functioning, which is becoming a long time when you look at other projects that have been completed. Bridgeport just put in their extended greenway in 1.5 years' time.
I agree. I completely agree with you, but there is state DOT involved in this. Had we chosen a local road, it's like the town has more control on it. It would have been a much simpler process. Right now, for the DOT, each time we send comments with responses, and each time we get their review back, that itself is taking us 3 months, because DOT has so much going on, and the last time we sent them comments was like 2 months ago, and we just heard back today. And now if we address the comments even as fast as we can in a week, again, they get back to us in 2 months. And unless we address all their comments appropriately, they would not give us a go-ahead to fund the project. And that is key for actually going into the technical design part of it. And yes, you're right, there were several iterations, but that's the whole point. That's a community process where, you ask for something, we go back to the drawing board, we come back with an option. And then there are some people who might who are actually key stakeholders there, the businesses. And whatever businesses you have, that's the town center. And if those businesses can't survive, then, we're defeating the purpose. So we have to balance our stakeholders' interests too. So we're looking at both safety, accessibility by bikeway, and, thriving economic development. And DOT is, again, we send back a conceptual rendering without diagonal parking, and they don't seem to agree. They had more questions on it.
Okay, but I think the town has made it pretty clear that we don't want angled parking.
No. What is existing right now may not be actually what will exist, but it could be a different alternative where, Jay, myself, and some of the town staff, and we also took economic development staff and the mayor and consultants, everybody for a walking tour, and we looked at each single segment, and that's when the consultant said, maybe I could do this. That was change the angle of the parking here to make it more safer, even if a bike lane, if the DOT is not budging on that, how to accommodate both safely. So he said he'll come back with an option.
I don't see how anybody can think backing into a spot on Main Street, a very busy Main Street in the center of town.
They were also
safe way
looking
to
at,
do things.
he was also suggesting parallel parking. He was also suggesting, maybe you would lose 2 spots if you did parallel park, but you would still be able to accommodate 6 spots there instead of 9. So he said he would come back with alternatives, but he was waiting, he meaning the consultant was also waiting for DOT's comments because he wanted to address everything together.
One, was there a biker in that group of people?
Yeah,
Cyclist?
yeah.
An experienced cyclist who
Who's
could
that?
comment?
The consultant does, and Mary Dean bikes all the time.
Okay.
And,
Bikes through the center.
Did anybody consider the area off I-95, the right-of-way in the back of that commercial strip, which
yes,
several years ago, the DOT gave us,
that was an
they
option.
gave us that right-of-way for a greenway, specifically, when they gave us that land, with the bikeway going along, I forget the name of the street right now, but where Old Center School stood, with the bikeway going around there, coming around the side, and coming out under the bridge, totally not going into that location at all, which meant that it could be safe for bikers, and also the existing parking could stay there.
Yeah, and DOT, the land that DOT gave based on the easement, we looked at it, it's a part of the center school site, and it's part of the shared parking that is being currently used behind the Huang School of Martial Arts, that site.
If I may comment, it is not.
It's not?
It is not.
Which- what
There
is-
is an alley roadway that runs back there that specifically has no parking signs.
I can bring you the drawing next week, next meeting, or I
wrote
will
it
scan and
3 or
send
4
it to you.
years back when it was suggested as our future bike path. When we were being given maps that said, go this way to go around through town. It was already decided we were going to do this. It was
Yeah.
only when the development of Center School came in that someone said, maybe we want to give this to the developer instead, that suddenly it disappeared off all maps. So, the very least, we have to be honest about what our choices were.
I do have a copy of the easement and the map, and maybe that's another dedication, and maybe I don't have what you're talking about.
This all
So I will send
precedes
it to you, I will send to the whole group, and I will also actually bring it to the next planning commission meeting. So you can take a look at what I have seen versus what your thoughts are. The mayor did bring this up. She said there is some dedication that was provided by DOT on that side. And she pointed to some easements, and we looked it up, and I think it was more, behind the lots, but I can show what I have, and then we can take it from there. But in the meantime, the project is not stagnant at all. It's still moving forward, and, from nothing to almost close to finishing. We have come a long way. It's just we'll have to have some more patience. And anyway, we can't do construction until spring. And I am hoping at least by January or February, they would start doing the engineering 90% designs.
To our two other commissioners, how do you feel about parking in which you back into a location, especially that has some biking associated with
A
it?
lot of towns have found it a very effective way of optimizing parking. But that's towns where they have multiple blocks, where they can retrain all of their population. If we're only doing it for 6 or 8 spots, I don't know that it makes sense. Because it's not like, if I learn how to pull into the ice cream store by backing in, there is no other parking that exists in Stratford that follows that model.
Correct.
So if we were to say we're gonna adopt this all over the place, then it might be something reasonable to consider. But if we're only gonna adopt it for those 6 spots, I don't know that it makes sense to adopt it. I think you're just creating another, something more for the rider and the biker to have to figure out.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
Mr. Vigliotti, any opinion?
I try to avoid parking there either way, if I can. I can't imagine what it would be like I can't even envision what it would be like to back into a spot.
As I said earlier, it doesn't, to my logic, of course, this is my logic, doesn't make any sense to me at all. Can we make a motion asking that the town planner express our concerns regarding angled parking in the center of town as a, to be considered when when a response is made to DOT? Mr. Watson?
I move that the planning ask our planner to send a letter of interest on our part, specifically dealing with the backward parking. But in addition, if I may, I would also like to know the right-of-way easement inclusions for biking that existed behind the property as a possible solution.
Yeah, I think it's on the side of the property. It's
It's on
along
the side.
I-95.
It runs parallel to 95.
Right. It's along the side.
There is one piece, I remember now, but that piece that you're talking about is sloped, and it slopes down all the way from highway to down, and the topography is as such that, it may not work out, but I can,
I think the
I'll
area
check.
he's talking about literally goes up to the highway,
Okay,
the concrete of the highway. Am I correct?
Absolutely. I rode my bike for 3 or 4 years on that every other day at least.
So we have a motion. Do I have a second?
Don't make me say it again.
Second by Mr. Vigliotti. Okay, we have you got that, the motion and the second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
So it passes unanimously with the 3 of us. Okay, so any questions on that?
no,
Okay. Coastal resiliency plan?
currently we are working on 2 grants that will be probably funded through FMA, Flood Mitigation Assistance, or PDM, Pre-Disaster Mitigation Programs. The funding period has opened, and I just finished entering the grant in the e-grants portal, so I might just submit it tomorrow. One of those grants is for advanced assistance, which means that Stratford has about 77 repetitive loss properties in the town, and so we are trying to research these repetitive loss properties with the help of a consultant and contact the property owners and the owners in the vicinity, figure out what problems they have and where flooding is occurring and how we can help mitigate the issue for them. And the consultant will come up with a toolbox based on building type and geography that can be replicated elsewhere too by other property owners. So it will consist of strategies that are low cost, that can be implemented fairly easily by a property owner versus broad, thinking on whether these properties should actually be repetitively mitigated, or would it make a sense for the property owner to, figure out alternatives to living there. So this is something that should involve community conversation, and that would require significant outreach and assistance from consultants. So that's a grant I'm working on, and if we get funded, this study may start sometime around next year, around the same fall next year. And the other grant that we are working on is based on.
About that, I assume it has a public component where you're essentially educating
Yes.
and consulting with or counseling
Yes,
our property owners in that.
that's a significant component of that.
Is there the town component of redesign of any of our existing zoning, or any measures that the town can do to make things easier, such as tax abatements for people who move forward 100% with their mitigation projects?
So the consultant will do the analysis, and he will develop solutions or recommendations. And if the recommendations, suppose, says we need to elevate this property, otherwise, it gets flooded and we can't afford the cost, then maybe if the property owner is interested, we can apply for a future grant through the same programs to elevate the property. But if the consultant says this whole area here shouldn't have more development because it has become so vulnerable to flooding that the costs of living here far outweigh the benefits, maybe then from there the recommendation to prevent development in this area for the future would arise, and that's when you propose a zone change. We can't propose a zone change without thoroughly investigating the area and talking to the homeowners and the people nearby about the possible solutions that they have. So that's that. And so whatever recommendations come out of this plan, my hope is that we apply for subsequent phases of grants to help mitigate flooding in this coastline and other repetitive loss properties upland.
Now, did I understand that there have been 77 properties
77.
identified? And how were they, bless you, how were they identified?
Based on they all have national flood insurance policies. So again, these are the properties that had an FIP, and they claimed after every storm flood loss claims.
So these
through
are
a
properties
FEMA.
who have.
Yes, and there could have been more through other private insurances, but they don't get counted by FEMA. Only the NFIP, and only the properties with NFIPs get funded through grants.
And if I remember the FEMA regulations correctly, it's houses that are regularly flooded.
Right.
That have a record of having flooded with a certain dollar amount each time, that essentially FEMA's now coming after them because they're going to go broke if we don't do
So
Do
FEMA,
you know where those 77?
I know it, but due to privacy restrictions, I can't disclose it
Are
to
they all
everyone.
around the town or in a particular?
They're mostly located to the south of Barnum Avenue. And there are quite a few to the north too, but mostly to the south of Barnum Avenue and until Lordship.
Okay, but that's the criteria of how they got on this
Yes,
list.
and because I am acting on behalf of the town to apply for these grants, I got access to know which properties are repetitive loss and which are severe repetitive loss properties. So they're defined as 4 claims or more are severe repetitive loss properties. Again, there is a catch to how much damage was done at each flood loss. And then anything under 4, if even one exceeds 25% of the market value of the property, then they're counted as repetitive loss properties. So there is a clear definition that FEMA has, and they have the list. They know who is getting funded every time after a flood.
Yeah, I was just curious as to how they were identified. I don't care
Yes.
who they are, but what the process was, and that, sounds like basically a fair process. Mr. Watson?
Yeah, we are going to be having more, which we're already having, not necessarily storm flooding, but monthly, lunar, all the flooding that we're
Tidal,
starting to
storm
see.
surge.
Tidal floodings, high tide floodings, those things. Does FEMA take all of these into account? So we're not just looking at Sandy flooding, we're looking at all of our...
Everything.
Everything.
Everything, this is something that is funded before a disaster.
Okay.
That money is different where, post-disaster, they open up a new funding stream because they want to help properties immediately. And again, because we're writing this grant, we're positioning ourselves in a better way, because if, God forbid, there is a storm like Sandy or Irene and funding opens up, we are in a better chance to get the funding because we are all prepared and we have our priorities.
Okay. Now, you said these were claims that were submitted. Is that over a year period, 5-year period, 10-year period?
I think I have historical data all the way from the 1970s and, when the FEMA program
So it
started.
goes back that far?
Yes.
Okay.
And then the second grant is based on property owners' interest, and there are 3 property owners on Washington Parkway. First one approached me, and that property owner said she's concerned about the flooding and she needs help, and I asked, are you interested in applying for a building elevation grant? And she said she would love that idea, and then she brought her neighbors on board, and mayor staff also reached out to other property owners on Washington Parkway. So if they're interested, but for the first round, we're applying for these 3 properties, and for the next round, which might open up again sometime next year around August, for other properties that are interested.
So there was no publicity
There
around
was.
getting maybe 5 other properties from another area?
Well, the town engineer, it all started with one property owner on Washington Parkway, complaining about flooding, and the town engineer was already looking to elevate the road there, because that's the problem there, and he was looking for infrastructure funding. And then once this conversation started, the funding has already started, period has already opened up, and there's only few that we can apply this time. But we did reach out to the mayor, and the mayor reached out to the councilman, and they have done outreach to the owners nearby in Washington Parkway, because that's priority in our coastal resiliency plan. So from there, we are looking at other properties. Based on the repetitive loss analysis that I'm applying for, the second round is going to fund the priorities that come out of that plan, unless...
In other areas?
In other
of town.
areas of
Okay,
town.
so it's, this is kind of like a starting,
A pilot, I
a
would say.
pilot program, that's the
Yes.
word I was looking for. And how often can you apply for this? Is it yearly?
Yearly. They open every year.
So, and when that is done, will there be outreach to other parts of the community?
We're, the second grant that I'm applying is the larger outreach to the community grant,
Okay.
and that's how they will all be notified.
Good, because I'm,
Yes.
there's 77 properties, you're only taking care of 3 of them, so
Well,
there's a lot more to go.
Because, again, we just came to know of it like a month ago.
Okay.
And the timing was perfect. When I came to know of it, the day before, somebody came and I said, I'm struggling with this.
Yeah.
And, if we wanted to reach to the majority, we did reach out to the Washington Parkway residents, but if we wanted to put it townwide, we don't think we would meet the grant deadline, which is next week. So we are taking it in 2 phases. The first phase is 3 pilot properties, and then the next phase is the overall town analysis.
I can understand the timeliness and that, but it would have been nice if this could have been something that could have been sent out to the entire town Because there may be properties that are in worse shape than Washington Parkway as far as needing to
Yeah.
be.
But
elevated.
again, FEMA also looks at the priorities. Not everyone gets funded like that. So if our coastal resiliency plan says Washington Parkway is a priority and there is a strategy, just elevating 2 properties would not mitigate flooding. So they want to look at the overall strategy. And our strategy is we would elevate the properties, we would elevate the road, the infrastructure. There is another grant that's opening that's called BRIC. I don't know the acronym for it, but it's mostly for infrastructure. And so we are saying we would elevate the properties, we would elevate the road there, and the third thing we would do is we would also do an analysis for all the properties in that area, so we would come up with future priorities. So that works in 3 phases.
So the whole area of the town, or
Yes.
the whole area of just Lordship?
As I said, the majority of repetitive loss properties are in that,
South of
end.
Barnum, yeah.
Yes. We would also look at the other top locations, but the top locations are, like I looked at the map, they're very small clusters. But the majority of these properties are south of Barnum Avenue. And so we are
Yeah.
looking at the whole
Okay.
there.
Okay, well, certainly I hope for future that the entire town will be looked at.
Yes,
Now, the other question I have, is that all you have on those 2?
yes.
Where do we stand? I thought we got also a grant to do some resiliency over at the water pollution plant.
Yes, we had, the team came up, like FEMA officials, DEEP officials, everyone came, they reviewed the site, and they were satisfied with our application. DEEP was supposed to go back and do a report on, how it satisfies their requirements, and they said they're working on it. And FEMA said the funding has to be reappropriated again, because they sent back funding from last year. And so the FEMA Region 1 folks are now waiting for the reappropriation of funding starting next year. And hopefully, we would get a grant award sometime in Feb or March. It's a process that they follow.
So we should hear something in February or March.
Or at the
regarding-
latest, April, yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
It's a comment, I think. I don't know if it's a question. One of the things that I found when we were working on the resiliency study was that the biggest unknown is when we do resiliency projects, what are the side effects of them? And I say this because I've been reading up on runways and how they can actually create more problems because they become a barrier for water passage. The area that you're talking about, there is a water passage there that we need to make sure between the Great Swamp and the bay that's down in that area. We need to make sure that whatever resilience, whatever road raising we do is going to eliminate a problem versus creating a problem in another area. So that's my question. Who is making those decisions right now?
That's a good question. Our coastal resiliency plan recommends several strategies to take care of all those issues. And I forgot to mention that we also applied not applied, I would say we were requested to provide our list of priorities to our local representatives and legislators, and we also made sure we let them know, because there's a U.S. Army Corps of Engineers grant that may open up, that, we have to take care of the bigger picture, not just site-specific, but infrastructure-wise, protect the coast, and look at the seawalls and the floodgates and the berms, everything that's been recommended in the coastal resiliency plan, and we did send that to our local, elected representatives too.
Okay, just to follow up on my earlier question, I noticed that in the October minutes, under coastal resiliency plan, you informed the commission that Stratford will be getting a FEMA grant.
Yes,
And I thought it was for the
WPCA. Yes.
So did we get the grant, but now we're waiting for the money, or do we have to
They
apply?
said their response is positive. We are, they wouldn't have come all the way to Stratford for the final checkup if they were not willing to fund us. All they are saying is that they are waiting for the money to come back again to them. So I think 90%, I'm sure we got it. It's a 2.5 million grant, but I would still wait for that official letter in hand.
And that is what you're expecting in
April.
April?
Yeah, March.
February, March, April, okay. So we technically,
That was
don't-
applied in
yeah.
2017.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
it takes time.
yes.
Good things take time. Any other questions? We can move on to other items. I think we could probably skip right down, let's go back to the Greenway project, because I see Linda Pepin is here. So come on up, come join us. Or over here?
Oh, come sit.
She can talk
Wherever
on
you
the
go.
mic too.
Or-
Oh.
No, come on up. Yeah.
Schematics are kind of big, and so I don't know, maybe we can pass them around. John only made one copy.
Okay. Well, let's see what you got, and then we'll,
Well, we could go to the big table. We can come down to you.
yeah.
Can we do that? Do you want to set them on this table, Linda? Yeah. We
Or-
can come down
Actually,
here.
we
We'd
have to
go
be
there
on the
'cause you have
camera.
a Microphone.
So I met with John Casey yesterday.
Could you speak on
Can
the
you hit
mic?
on the button?
Yes.
By the way, just for the record, Linda Pepin is the chairwoman of our subcommittee for the Greenway.
She's the staff to the,
She's what?
she's not the chair, right?
I'm the chair.
She's the chair.
Yes, chair, okay.
So I met with John Casey yesterday just to get an update of the schematics so that we can kind of look them over. Basically, what we're up to is BSC, which is our company that actually is doing complete streets too, I
Yes.
presume they are. So they're trying to blend both of them together. I know Harold had mentioned a little while ago about along 95. And that was supposed to be part of our project, but because Complete Streets was doing that end of it, they're sort of taking over. You know, we're gonna be consulted and we're gonna be meshed together, but Complete Street, the Greenway had originally put in a plan for back there. But because Complete Street stepped forward and they have the cash and so we let them, and I think they're proceeding on that. Am I correct in saying that, or?
I am, like, everybody has been pointing to that piece of land behind the businesses by the
Yeah.
95.
Yeah.
But the easement that I saw was more like a triangular piece that is now a shared parking lot for the businesses in the back, like you see the parking there. And then there is a brook right,
Yeah,
adjacent to it. So I will
because
go
we
back.
actually had a plan.
Yeah,
know
I will
Harold-
go back and look at, if there's another easement.
Yeah, yeah.
Like they're saying on 95.
So basically, what we have right now is we have from,
I can pass the copies to them.
it's kind of, but Beacon Point Road, we're gonna come up that. We're gonna come up to Elm Street on one side of Elm Street.
It's right there.
Okay.
Okay, the lower part of Elm Street, not
Going north or south?
going north.
Going north, okay.
Yeah, north.
Yeah, north. And then we're going to come up from from Elm Street to, we're gonna pass Academy Hill and come up the next street,
To Broad.
which is, what,
Broad.
Broad Street. We're gonna
To
come
Broad.
up Broad Street to Main Street. There's gonna be an intersection at Main Street for crossing. We're gonna come up to the Perry House, and we're gonna come back on the same side as the Perry House. We thought that crossing over with 95 coming off would just be a disaster. There's a little area at the Perry House where they're gonna have a bike rack, and they're gonna figure out some trees and shrubbery and stuff. They think that that part from Main Street up to the Perry House, I know we talked about trees being cut down, but I think they're gonna try to work around most of those trees. Let's see what else. I think that's basically what we're doing. Most of it is just signage from behind, where we ended up over there by the water. What is that road?
Bird's Eye.
Beacon, up into Elm Street, and then up Broad. So that's mostly signage. The only thing that's really gonna be constructed is that intersection on Main Street. It's gonna have a light. They don't know exactly how they're gonna work it, but it's gonna be a light that, is able for them to cross over, down to the Perry House, and turn around and come back.
Yeah, and I also would like to add that the mayor expressed an interest in actually blending the old with the new. Like if you're having sidewalks that are of a different treatment on the new complete streets, she didn't want the Greenway extension to have a different character, and everything should be seamless.
I think it's gonna be all,
And
Harold,
it's
do you know more, because I started out.
Yeah,
on-
we were both committees
Both.
were very insistent that's why I keep talking about a network. The Greenway is a network, and in order for it to be a network, it needs to have,
Consistent.
there'll be different areas where we're on road, it'll be mainly signage and whatever, but wherever we can, we need to have a consistency across the town with the way our Greenway looks, so that people feel comfortable using it, and it naturally will lead them from one spot to the next. So we were very clear when we spoke with BSR that that is what we were expecting out of them. It was one of the reasons that we looked at them so closely to award them contracts for both the Elm Street and also the Main Street bike, specifically so they could blend the two.
So right now, you're going up to Main Street at West Broad.
Correct.
And then, correct me if I'm wrong, Complete Streets will take it from there to Barnum?
Yeah.
Yes.
As far as I understand, that's
Yeah.
what they're,
Well, actually,
will
the way,
blend.
currently it stops about 200 feet or 200 yards short of Barnum.
Okay.
That's
okay, yeah.
Yeah.
what they were talking about doing.
I think it's all the way from Harvey Place to
Yep.
the east of West, I would say that's south,
South of Barnum.
yeah.
Yeah,
South of
just
Barnum
south.
and all the way to the Barnum Avenue.
Now, what is your timetable for this part?
Well, we're supposed to meet in December, and presently, this project right here is about almost $200,000. We have currently almost
500?
Yeah, 500,000, yeah.
Okay.
To spend. So there's no, and John Casey and I kind of thought even at our next meeting, we would start thinking about the next phase in this. But it's got to coincide with Complete Streets. So Complete Streets is going up to Barnum Avenue. We'd like to go further because we are afraid of, we did have a small project at Shakespeare Theater, but because, it had
Shakespeare
the
burned.
fire, and we kind of put that on hold. So we were gonna go that way also, a little off-street kind of area for that, but we're putting that on hold right now, because we're not quite sure what that's gonna entail, or how we can,
So that would be,
Well,
my
that
next
would,
question
that would
is
be
what's-
part of a little project, that's just, a little signage and,
Right. So
so.
what thoughts do you, or has the committee any thoughts about what the next
Which way?
phase
No,
would be in the?
Not right this moment. I think we'd like to go south also. I know Harold and I have talked about that.
I'm happy to hear that there's a little extra money, because
Yeah.
you know me well enough to know
Yeah.
that what I've been advocating for is not the most expensive greenway, the most functional greenway.
Right, correct.
That we spend, if we could invest $200,000 in doing nothing but striping and signs every quarter of a mile, we could expand our network out
Double.
to be 7 miles, which would give you a 14-mile ride, and then that's long enough for anybody in any of the surrounding towns to come and say, I'll try out Stratford.
That's correct.
Because that's worthwhile them putting their bike on their car, driving here, and saying, I'll take this ride. And it's quite honestly, if we could get it from Paradise down to Short Beach, that's a good ride.
Yeah.
Everybody would love that. And the majority of that, we are putting in the infrastructure where we need to, but if we could get the rest of it, like across the Army engine plant, I did it by hand one year. I put arrows down there saying bike, 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 and it lasted for the summer. But if we could do that in a slightly less informal way and maybe a more legal way, we could actually come this spring have people coming into town and using our bike trails. You know me well enough, Linda, to know that I always say that we have got to look at this not from our needs, but from the bikers' needs. What is the experience of riding in Stratford? What can we do to make it better? If we could take $50,000 and say, let's buy an extra set of brushes so that we can brush all of those bikeways at least twice a year to get the glass out of them, that also would make cyclists love Stratford. Because right now, if you ask them, they say, it's a great ride, but you got to have an extra tire because you're inevitably going to run over glass. So there are things that we could do, I think, taking the two projects that we have on the books and put a little money. Maybe it might be as simple as completing the stripes from the existing Tiger Greenway phase down to Short Beach, which is almost all off-road, so that's an easy thing to do. And then completing the stripes up to even a block short of Paradise would get us the semblance of what we're saying in the future we want for our Greenway.
Right, and I know that in the beginning of Complete Streets, when they were talking about which area they were going to start, they were talking about Paradise Green, they were talking about backing in parking. They say, I know, they're big on that, and they say that once you get used to it, it's the ticket. I know. But I think
Smitha
everybody has to
knows.
have a backup camera, car camera.
Smitha knows this. That is something that regional planners across the country are all trying to sell.
Because that was the other thing.
That's a planning
They
concept,
kind of talked
a
about
traffic
how
planning
they would
concept that everybody talks about.
include the Greenway in that backing up parking, which I know Harold was at that meeting too. We were like, are you serious?
I know at one point they said that, well, they do this in New York City. And I've been in New York City several times, and the only place I've seen it is near a fire department.
Yeah.
Well,
You're right.
it's the staff
It's
that's
the-
parking backwards. I
They
could
say
see
that once the
Yeah.
community gets used to it.
I think I am more inclined to see parallel parking than, you know.
Well, they
That's a
would never
better
be
compromise
Greenway to cut
for
through there.
everyone. If DOT agrees,
Yeah.
I would say 2 spots.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
look at Milford, that's what they do.
Yeah.
Even
They're
New
parallel.
New Haven has a lot of parallel parking and bike lanes next to it, and it's not
Having
that
ridden
bad.
my bike for a decade in New York City, and then having ridden my bike for 5 years here, the thing that I worry about is that we do not present more traffic safety problems for riders. So whatever parking takes place, it's got to be with the idea that our riders on their bikes are not going to be aware the way a New York City rider might be aware of cars opening their doors and all those kind of things, because it's not the major part of the environment here. It's going to happen less frequently, but I will guarantee you that it's going to cause accidents.
But the good part will be that the bike lanes will be painted green and they'll be prominent. So now everybody
Yeah,
knows
they're prominent.
that there is a bike lane next to the parallel parking lane. So people who park will be more certain that there may be a bicyclist.
Yeah, that would help, but, I mean, we all know that New York City is going through a phase right now where bicyclists are being killed almost every day. So I'm not sure we want to look at New York City as a,
I don't think we are looking at New York City.
I hope not. Well, that's what they told us. I remember, this is several years ago when it went to some of these forums that they were having, and the people were saying, well, this is what they do in New York City,
No,
and I'm like,
That's not a good example for town of Stratford.
No, but
No, it's not.
it's again, it's, once we build enough of these bike lanes, then people will accept them as part of their life. What I'm concerned about initially is that we have a display Complete Streets project here. It's not going to be very long. We're talking about 1.5 miles, and to get everybody used to it is going to take a whole different thing. So we need to be super cautious about the safety of it. I know that New Haven has a huge amount of painted lanes, which is great. When they started putting them in, it didn't make any difference. People would try to run you down just as well as, you know, had you been on a separate lane altogether. But they have gotten better, so people can learn.
Yeah.
So where we stand now is, we were hoping to start already, but we haven't. So engineering and John Casey had come up with a few little things that BSC needed to change. So Rob did change them, and so we just got the schematics like 2 days ago.
Oh, good. Then
So
we'll really
at our
be up to
next
date.
meeting in December, we'll try to get, what we're going to try to do is, there's going to be a signage stop at the Perry House, which will include Aaron's Gym, Sterling House, a little bit history of, you know, Baldwin Center and the library, just for some, you know, knowledge of that.
That's good.
Yeah, I think it's a good project.
Schematic?
Can I ask one question before we get to that?
Okay.
Now, we have heard about this MetroCog bike share program that may come up. We don't have any updates
don't.
right now, right?
Yeah.
I do have an update,
Oh.
actually, but I thought I would wait and give you a clear answer next month.
Well, my question is, have you, the Greenway Committee, even heard about this?
No.
Because I would think there should be some
Some-
synergy
yeah.
together.
I mean, I think we heard about it with Complete Streets, but I don't think we heard.
Yeah, that's because we haven't met, like, for Greenway Committee in the past
Okay, couple.
cycle, and this project has been picking up speed last
good.
2 months.
Oh, good.
And right now, we're trying to see if what the region is asking us to do is
And-
the
and
better
what
option or not.
size room they need to set up their stations, too.
Yeah, it's also like, you know, we spoke to bike share companies, and they feel like we should act as a region as opposed to an individual municipality. And Stratford's ready, Bridgeport is ready, but other towns are not ready.
Okay,
And we are still thinking
okay.
how best to approach this.
Well, I think somewhere along the way here, we can,
Yes, and I'm also going to,
Accommodate
yeah, and GBT, Greater Bridgeport Transit, is also looking for a federal grant to fund bike racks. And I was gonna meet with him, the Doug Holcomb, who heads GBT. I'm gonna meet with him like this Friday, I think, to sit down and talk what we can do to get this project going for Stratford.
Oh, good,
okay.
okay. If you want, then maybe we can
Yeah.
go down and if anyone from all our public here, if you would like to come in and take a look at this, please, we're going to put it down on the table down there.
So
just be signage and.
this
This
is
is
Main
the
Street
biggest,
here,
yeah.
okay?
This is the biggest little
And
project.
so what you're seeing on Main Street, if I'm correct, is this Main Street over here? No, that's
No.
not. What you're seeing on Main Street here is, remember, the Greenway Complete Streets is running right up here,
Right,
okay?
Right.
So this is the first project, this is Stratford's project, that has been funded for a long time, that's gonna go in. But it will connect up with what will become the Complete
Complete
Streets
Streets.
project. So what you're seeing here is a very intensive intersection that we would have been able to afford as part of this project. So it's actually, there's all this talk about they were gonna elevate this with the textured pavement, do everything as a means of slowing down the traffic a little bit. So it has to be high enough that the snowplows won't rip it all out,
yeah.
but, or low enough that the snowplows won't rip it out, high enough that the cars feel it's like bump when they
Yeah.
go over it, because that's how we're gonna get them aware of that intersection.
Just
I
over
think
by Second Hill Lane.
These are both traffic signal,
Yeah.
these are both traffic signal lights. Then they go down Broad Street on both sides of Broad Street. I think that they're gonna do narrowing of traffic here.
Narrowing of traffic definitely on.
On Broad Street, they're gonna narrow the lane, because there'll be a lane on both sides, I believe, unless it's changed. No, it is, it's still,
Yeah.
it still is on both sides. And you have a bus turnout here for the school there. I don't want to step.
No, you're fine.
Okay. I dreamed this. I dreamed this at times.
This is like.
But these are actually using services. This is a new sidewalk that goes in here. These are 10 feet wide sidewalks that go this way. They connect up with what will become 10 feet pavement sidewalks of the Complete Streets. So in terms of trying to make stuff look the same for both projects, we really have tried to put that into the design of both of them from the very beginning. We were really insistent on that.
So Smita, do we have any idea where these metro bike share places are going to be? I would think they'd be in this area.
Yes, I mean, we can select locations and suggest to the vendors, but, you know, it's about attracting a vendor to the town that's become a little bit of an issue because we do have enough, I can say that we do have enough demographic capacity to say that, you know, we can have bike share in Stratford, but Zaxter company keeps saying that, you know, bikes are not the thing anymore, it's the scooters, and we are not interested in
We don't.
scooters. And that's the problem there, and I.
The ones that we do like
Yes.
this, or?
And I'm like, they tell me.
No, I think they want
But what we do need here, if we're really gonna encourage people to get off their bikes and stop, we need to have many bike racks.
And that I'm gonna talk to GPT and make sure we get
There should be
funded
one at
for
every-
enough bike racks, so we can have them.
We were kind of waiting, when we were doing our work here, we were waiting for Complete Streets to come up with the design, the kind of bike rack, something that would essentially be used all throughout the town. Whether it's a Seaway one or a bicycle wheel one or whatever, something that could be and I actually called the manufacturer and said, what's the cheapest we could get them for? He was saying to me about $250 with installation, shipping, and everything else, making them come in about $550. Because I actually was speaking with local merchants to say, if you were given permission, would you put in a bike? Would you pay for it? A bike rack in front of your store? And I know that there were two stores who were like, give me the envelope, I'll do it the second. They were all like really, they know that helps in the summertime. So we might need to look at zoning to make it easier on every store to put one in if that's what they want. And come up with some kind of a guidance to them of where they should put it.
We should come up with bike parking regulations, and that's what is my next. Because we currently don't ask private developments to accommodate bikes, and all they do is automobile parking, and if we're having all these beautiful bike lanes and bike racks, when private developments, are to be accessed by these bicycles, where would they park their bikes?
Thank you.
So we should come up with that as our next
Thank
item.
And I
on
think we
agenda.
talked about some kind of a community,
Rotating fund or
yeah,
some kind of
an
thing.
informational.
But that would be a fabulous Rotary tell me what you see on this.
You're saying protecting the trees.
Exactly. We
That was part of your
specifically,
Because we were gonna take down, they were gonna take down
Right.
trees.
and,
I didn't
and,
want them to
said,
take
oh
it
no,
down.
we're not taking
and
that.
they actually moved this further.
Yeah.
They moved it to accommodate some trees, but one of these historic trees, they actually bent this around. Now, as a bike rider, give me this every 500 yards, because you don't always like to ride up the straight path. That's what makes you say, oh, let me stop for a second and look at it.
For listening to me.
No, I'm serious, because that's something that we need to show this as a model
like that.
to the rest of the town, saying, we can accommodate what's there, we can make things, all of these make this much more human. So, in any case, this is the sidewalk, correct? So that's the only real building work that we're doing. We're putting sidewalks here, we're putting sidewalks here, and we're putting sidewalks around the corner, down Elm Street until we get to, Birdsley. No, there's one section there that doesn't have sidewalks. I think it's actually on the road. There's one section there that can go on the road, on Elm Street. And then when you turn on Birdsley, that we're putting huge paths in there, that essentially will cause basically a one-way traffic movement through that area. And that's where it probably needs to be coordinated with FEMA, because if they're coming in for bigger dikes, they could actually cap us at a nice 10-foot dike. That would be the most wonderful way. Who would care if the sewer's there? If you had a view out over the bay, it would be the best place in the world to run.
Where are you talking about?
We're gonna go down Birdsley and then across,
Yes.
I forget the name of the street, it's the one that runs along the sewer out to the existing Beacon Point, across Beacon Point. But what we did for now was, I think, all really doing for that area is stripers. So we're not gonna do anything that's non-permanent. I mean, anything can easily be replaced if they come through there, because looking at coastal resiliency, they were talking about a dike that we could actually put a trail on. So if that happens, we could end up with something that would be really sexy to anybody else when we say, look at our resiliency here that we're all actually making into a social good. We would have people coming here to see that in and of itself, I think. So, this is like a Christmas present. I'm so happy to see this. I want to see this built.
Well, hopefully, as the bike share goes forward, that gets brought up, and maybe if you have some suggestions as far as language for these bike racks at commercial properties, zoning should have, that could actually come from the planning commission
Oh.
as a text amendment to the zone. We found that we can do that.
Another place in the box.
Well, here's,
Yes.
oh, that's what this is. This is Shore Road. We originally were planning on doing a really pretty thing through the Shakespeare, until we farmed. But it looks like what they did was Shore Road runs this way.
It runs, that's where the Shakespeare, wait,
Oh, this is the water side.
yeah.
So this is,
Well, the Shore Road has flooding problems too.
Yeah.
and,
it has to be a-
well, the Shore Road turns up here. So basically what you do is you come down, you come, is it Shore Road, and it's by the antique, the yellow Victoria? Is that Shore Road there? Is that called Shore Road? No, Shore Road is over here, but
It's right,
And it goes behind the Shakespeare.
on the Shakespeare.
Yeah.
That's Shore Road.
so this, the Shakespeare property would have been over here
Over
somewhere.
by the yacht club.
The Shakespeare property would have been over here somewhere. So this is not far into.
They were gonna raise that.
And that's, you know, John Casey keeps saying that just elevating that may not help because there are other issues, cost flooding in that area, so if we have to look at priority project.
Problem is it gets flooded from both sides. That's where it's hard for us to
Yeah.
control it. But in any case, what we're really doing is putting a stop and view kind of station
it would strictly be, you know, grassed over and maybe some picnic areas, but just an overlook. And I've been up there for the fireworks, and what a view, of the airport,
But
first
can I,
floor,
when you look at any FEMA map, any global warming water sea level rise for the next 50, 60, 70 years, that land is always above water.
Oh, it is, yeah.
So it actually, we could actually use it as a kind of an emergency, FEMA gathering spot with a nice lane.
The only problem is
It is a close enough.
getting to it is not easy.
Yeah.
You actually go into an area that's flooded all the time. I don't care
On
what
top of
water,
Yeah.
and then you go off.
And it's not considered safe there, it's still closed. It's closed technically from additional dumping, but it's not cleared for habitation.
When you look at the Greenway maps, where it's really supposed to, as you come around from the, I call it the tiger phase, that's next to DeLuca, that area. When it comes down to there, then it comes across. It's actually supposed to, at that point, not ever come down the main road. That's supposed to be a secondary entrance. It's supposed to go along the dike at the Army Engine Plant until it gets down to, I forget the name of the restaurant, down in Knapp's area, and then take the roadway over across the very northern end of Short Beach with a wooden bridgeway that goes across there. That then will be absolutely, because you'll end up having miles of water.
We don't know how long that's going to.
Yeah, we're
Close it?
Yeah.
Well, the terrible thing is that land on the top of the dike, and there is a quarter-mile dike that goes out in the water that was all set up. It's all the work has been done, the electrical and everything for a gazebo.
really.
So the only thing we are missing is there's a 100-foot spot that still needs to be filled in.
That's the one that floods at the tide?
Yep.
And if you don't get through it in
Yeah,
time?
no. I'm going all the way back to, it's right down near the animal shelter.
Between the animal shelter.
You know where the bike path,
Yeah.
the bike path goes along the shore here and then it turns?
Turns.
And over here's DeLuca,
Yeah.
right there, there's that area of swampy land. We could put a small bridge in there, or a little walkway, or take some of the sediment from all this work they're doing, and get that 100-foot section done. It would prevent some of the water and flood from coming up that way, up towards Rash, but it also would connect up to the dike, and then we would have a world-class bike.
That's absolutely another.
I do have another question. The bikeway that exists now, or control. I've seen some pictures on Facebook where it looks like it's in disrepair.
Yeah, there's some of those bricks have been taken up and stuff, and I've talked to them. We have to kind of get maintenance to, when we first set this up, it was like, they can do only what they can, do. Yeah, but, yeah.
But maybe some of that $300,000 could be earmarked to repair.
Absolutely.
And in fairness to that, that was not, the idea of stamp pavements was not as advanced as it is now.
Yeah.
So the ideal thing would be just to pull some property and do
Yeah.
stamp.
Whatever, it just seems like,
Because I know there's one area there.
you want to make sure that it
Don't do
has
it.
that.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm not suggesting that. I'm saying like $25,000
Yeah.
to go fix. And
Thank you.
if I have a couple of suggestions. But that was great, thank you for bringing that. No.
Meeting calendar.
Now, yeah, I have a couple of
Okay.
questions. Linda, something came up at one of our meetings 2-3 months ago concerning Lordship Boulevard. And one of the owners wanted us to allow him not to have sidewalks in lieu of a payment to the town, which is done in many places.
many cases.
And one of the things we talked about at that time, you can correct me if I'm wrong, about looking into using that money that he paid and making this kind of green pathway, painted pathway along Lordship Boulevard to then kind of go into Access Road,
Access road.
you know, from the turnpike on
Yeah,
down,
yeah.
or as far as we could. I mean, we were talking about a white stripe and green paint. I assume how expensive can that be? I don't know. But is that something that you guys would take up or consider?
I guess we would. I think it would have to come from planning, though.
I was talking to the town engineer about that. He has to reappropriate the money because it goes to sidewalk bond, like, sidewalk fund, and not bond. And now, if we're not, there are locations where the sidewalks can't be implemented, that's where, he should request the council to reappropriate the money towards bicycle lane markings.
So how do we get that done? Do we make a recommendation?
I
to
think
the
it's the
council?
town engineer who
Do we
should.
make a,
Has to allocate.
You can request me to follow up, and I would follow up with the town engineer and see how we can get this item on the council's agenda for the budget, where they can reappropriate it.
okay. Do you need a motion, or do you just?
No, it's just fine.
What do you guys think?
I'm gonna go back and talk to him
I,
anyway.
if you want to move that, I will be happy to move that.
Okay,
I-
I'll
it's
talk to him.
Worth asking the question.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because that might be a way of not touching your $300,000, but still get
But still connecting somewhere down the.
correct, right. And I want to say, I'd have to look in the minutes.
Have
40
have you
40
rode down Lordship Boulevard? Because,
It was 44,000.
44,000?
When
That should get you something.
When I was actively doing the Stratford Bike Club, we did a route that went from Shakespeare to Short Beach to Long Beach, up Lordship Boulevard, across to Bridgeport, down to, what's the Barnum Park? I mean,
Beersley Park?
no,
Oh.
no, none of that.
Oh,
existed.
Seaside Park?
We went to Seaside around, did a whole loop down, and came back all the way again. It was a fabulous ride, and the reason I did it was because there's a Fairfield County Bike Club that does that once a year, and it really was interesting. There's only a couple places where we really, bike lanes would make a huge difference in terms of increasing the safety. But for the most part, that road is so wide. I know that with Amazon coming in, it's going to be busier, but even so, for the most part, there's enough side on that road. Even with 2 lanes of traffic, you still have a good.
Yeah, and I think
4
they're
or 5
planning on
feet.
looking at the effect of Amazon on the traffic, so there might be some changes even to the road, but at the very least, we can get on
Get on there.
their agenda, in their thought process to consider that. Now, on a couple of kind of housekeeping things, because I went on the town website and looked at who's on your committee, and then I looked at your last minutes. Is Tim Bishop still on your?
No.
I
He's been
didn't
off.
think so. And I
Tim
know,
Bishop's been off for years.
right, and I know Ed Matosian passed away. so-
Right. And
Well, they're
and
both
Joe
listed.
Bexey, I'm not sure. He hasn't been feeling that well.
Okay. But
So, so
technically
I'm glad.
still on.
Harold's been on it, but now that you appointed him on it and
Yeah.
John Staley, that's perfect. And they can report to the planning commission. Joe was doing that for us, and then
Okay.
Joe hasn't been there in the last
Yeah.
probably year.
Yeah, and he hasn't
So,
been on the
yeah,
commission
yeah.
for a while. Jason Santee, do you still, or he
No,
was listed as a council liaison?
He's not on there anymore either.
No?
It-
Okay. Do you have a council liaison?
No.
Okay, maybe we could send a
Send-
note to the council clerk asking her to convey to the council that we would
We
like.
would like-
You would like
Yes.
a liaison. Dave Colleen's not on it.
No, Dave Queen.
No, I didn't think so. But I would hope that we could add Susmitha as the town planner. That's kind of where Dave was.
Right, right,
I think it's also codified in the charter.
right, right.
Okay. Joe Vexi, we can leave. Now, I also noticed Patrick Gribben and Roger Sauls. They were added to your committee officially, or?
Yes, they were
Okay.
added officially to our.
Then
board.
we just
They-
have to get it
yes.
on the website.
Okay.
Like I said, it's a little bit of a housekeeping
Okay.
stuff, because,
Who do we report that to? 'Cause
If you send me the list
I'll send
with
you
the
the
email addresses
Okay.
and phone numbers for everyone, I'll have an in-house list.
Okay.
And I will also send the information to David Wright. He won't post the phone numbers, but he will put their addresses and
In their email?
their names,
Oh, their names.
maybe
just their
email.
names, yeah.
Okay,
Because I want to make sure that you have the resources also that you have. Now, we have a couple people who have, and you, the commission members received, James Simon has asked to be put on the Greenway Committee, and I'd like to take that up and add him to the Greenway Committee, so that if you're having a meeting in December, he can
Okay.
start that.
Okay.
Okay?
so why don't I give you my email, and then you can email me. I have Harold's, but I don't have John Staley or Simon, Mr. Simon.
Yeah, we can get that information to you.
And also
once we
Mike,
approve them. There is a Michael Masisco, who happens to own Tony's Bikes in Milford, and he is interested, but Mr. Simon I spoke with, Mr. Masisco I haven't been able to get on the phone.
Okay.
So I'm going to keep trying, but those are two people that we'd like to add. At least one of them tonight, and maybe the
Okay.
next one next month, just so you know.
Mr. Simon is on your planning commission?
No,
Oh, okay.
no, he's
Okay.
just a person
Just a-
who's interested.
okay.
Same
Who's a-
thing with Michael Masisco.
Mike. I think Mike has been to a couple of our meetings.
He might have a long time
He
ago.
does, young gentleman, right?
I've never met
Yes,
the man.
yes.
Yeah, I
Oh,
just have his
think-
paperwork.
yeah.
So we're going to follow up. Tonight, what I'd like to do is add Mr. Simon to the,
Can you also please add Mike, if that's possible?
well, what if he says he's not interested?
Oh, I thought he contacted you.
No, I have an application, but I haven't been able to
Get in
get a
touch
hold of him to confirm that he's interested.
Well,
I mean, I don't have a problem. If you want to add him, we can always
if,
take him
if
on.
we would benefit from him.
Okay.
Seeing as how he does
Absolutely.
every biker in a 50-mile
Okay.
area.
Well, would you like to make that motion?
I don't know his last name, Mike
Michael Masisco
Wisisco.
and
Masisco.
Masisco.
I move that we add Michael Masisco and James Simon. Anybody else? No. To
Don't all rush us.
the Greenway Committee.
Okay.
Second.
Thank you, Jim. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone, no, it's unanimous. There's nobody else here. So I'll get you this information, because I do have your email. So, yeah,
El Pepinet.
I'll send you their applications,
Okay.
and you can take it from there. I hope that, because it was,
My mother.
I looked at the website.
The hospital tonight, too, so
Oh,
I know.
I'm sorry.
No, it's my mother and my mother-in-law.
Oh, my gosh.
Unfortunately, we've had a tough year. You know,
Well,
my mom's 92 and my mother-in-law's 96.
oh,
So
Well,
we have good
I have-
genes, but oh
yeah.
my God, we're just like going crazy.
well, I really appreciate your coming
Thank
tonight.
you so much for coming.
Yeah,
It means a lot.
So you'll get me that? And
I'll
Gail,
get you
can
that
always send-
information, and we'll keep you in touch with the MetroCog Bike Share
Okay, yes.
Program, and certainly when you have your meetings. Who's your secretary? You?
Lori Barr, usually.
Because I know you haven't had a lot of meetings,
Yeah.
but it
We're
sounds like you're
supposed
going
have-
to.
We're supposed to have one in December, so it's the first Wednesday in December,
Okay.
which is the third of.
And where is that? Here?
Yeah, it's here. It's either downstairs, they kind of pick a room for us.
Okay.
to
And
see
at
where-
7? Or-
7:30.
7:30,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Because that way I can also, when I tell these gentlemen that
Yes.
they're on, that the next
Because I
meeting
can add
is
them to the
here.
list and,
Yeah. And I'll talk to Dave because the website is so far off.
yeah.
And I was
Oh,
like,
th-
is there
Tim
something
Bishop
wrong
hasn't
here?
been on in years, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so,
And I think the website doesn't give email addresses of commission or committee
Okay.
members, and that's, if anybody from the public wants to contact you, how will they contact you?
through you.
I think in other towns, they kind of put their email addresses. If you don't like a personal email address, you should create a separate email just for public service business.
Well, when I talk to Dave, I'll find out
Yeah.
what's the standard for our
For that,
website, because they have all kinds of rules
Yeah.
about what
Yeah.
goes
Okay.
on there. Obviously, we can have
Mhm.
the email address, but, you know, they may, I don't know, they may just put the chairman
Okay.
on it.
They could,
Could we have a Stratford Greenway
we tr-
at Stratford and just have it forwarded to?
no, they,
I don't think people will trust an email like that, because if you don't attach a name to it, most likely people will think, you know, we don't know if they won't even bother to email when it's a general email inbox. I think we need to have a strong contact.
yeah.
Well, let me look into it. You know, this is, we're going to be switching members in January, and I just want to make sure some of these things are taken care of so that the new commission, you know, knows what's going on and move forward. So I really appreciate all that you've done for all the years that you've done it, Linda. And I have a
enjoyed
feeling
it.
it's going to be busy.
I'm not that much of a biker, but I know Harold keeps us on our toes. and
Oh, he
so
will. He
helps.
keeps us on our toes.
He's an asset to our committee.
Yeah. So thank you, and
You're
I
welcome.
hope everything works out.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, take care. Okay, very good.
So we have to vote on the meeting calendar for 2020.
Okay. Meeting calendar, which you should have gotten in your email. Basically, it's the third Tuesday of the month here. Obviously, if the new commission comes in January and wants to change them, they still have until the 31st. But at least we can have the first meeting January 21st of 2020. And at that organizational meeting, you always pick the chair and go from there. Third Tuesday of the month. And I did not see any holidays on the
No.
third Tuesdays, so I didn't make any adjustments. So I'll entertain a motion to accept the meeting dates as presented. Thank you, Jim.
I second.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you all. So that's unanimous. There's nothing on the text amendment for the commercial kitchen, right?
No.
And
It's-
did you say you had something on the MetroCog, or did you already say it?
I will provide more information once I'm more clear after I speak with GBT this Friday
Okay.
on Metro. But one thing I would like to add, it's just, you know, there's a letter at the end of your package that I received from John Bergson, who used to write, or who still writes for the Connecticut Post, I think. And he did a very good analysis of how many parking spaces each of our retail centers have, like retail outlets, like Big Y, Stratford Square, Walmart, and how not a single one of them has a bicycle rack, and how we should actually look into the bicycle parking regulations. So the interest is from the public too, for us to actually explore the bicycle parking regulations for the town. We should start working on it starting next month.
Okay.
Yes.
So that'll be on
For the next month's
agenda
agenda.
next month. If you push your button.
Okay. 3 years ago, I wrote, based on, I think it was West Hartford, a complete streets policy for the town that never got adopted or even read.
I think we have a complete streets policy online for the town that has been officially adopted by the town council.
Is it a one-page or a two-page?
I think it's
Please.
a one-page.
What they did was they took out all of the governing parts of it.
Okay.
So you're probably right. We do need to go back and look and see what do we need to have.
We have to amend our regulations. Now we have a policy that says the town endorses complete streets. It's about putting the nuts and bolts, like bike parking, bike racks, bike lanes, necessary infrastructure.
But it would put a true first-class national complete streets policy gives notice to all of your developers, all of your real estate owners, all of your DOTs. It puts them on notice that any of their projects must take this into account, that your town is committed to it. And it also helps, I know Tiger grants are gone, but it also helps when it comes to funding complete streets. Those policies that have the best written get the most funding. Thank you.
Okay.
Now,
Next is, I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
so you're going to vote on the calendar, or did you pass
We
the
just
motion?
passed it, I'm just
Okay.
going to sign it.
Okay.
That's why I was kind of discombobulated. So next thing on our agenda is the TOD zoning district proposed expansion.
Okay. So I think many of you in the audience are there for this. I'm sorry, this is put last on the agenda. I should have put it first on the agenda so that you keep coming to our meetings every time. I want to see people in the audience.
It was so exciting, you'll keep coming back, I know.
So essentially, what I'm suggesting as the town planner is that we relook at our TOD ordinance and as a first leg of adopting village district regulations to the area between Barnum Avenue intersection and Paradise Green. Only that piece. Like we have our complete streets from Barnum Avenue to Harvey Place right now. So if we extend the same, concept of complete streets beyond Barnum Avenue to Paradise Green, I think it would be ideal to see some kind of overlay district there that may not have the same density and scale that the TOD proposes from Barnum to Harvey, but maybe of lower intensity that gradually, tapers down to the residential neighborhoods. So right now, our TOD allows 40 bedrooms up to 50,000 square feet, or maybe I'm saying it vice versa, 50 bedrooms up to 40,000 square feet. And then the higher, taller buildings are allowed near the train station, which is 6 stories is the max. And then the 4-story buildings are allowed more near the town hall and the area near Barnum Avenue. So my suggestion is for this commission to be looking at a village district overlay. I may not call it a TOD expansion, but a village district, which is a lower intensity, but still better density than what exists right now. Because I've also worked on several grants in the past for transit, and the first things that transit needs is density. And if you do not have the adequate density, the government is not interested in investing in the infrastructure, because what if they invested in the infrastructure and you don't have the ridership? It defeats the purpose. So we have, and also for other reasons that, the state is suffering, the towns are suffering due to lack of affordable housing. And single family still is a dream for many Americans, but there are also people who are looking to downsize, and especially the millennials and who are the younger generation who want to commute to New York City And, the seniors, I have received quite a few phone calls in the past 1 year that I've been in this office from seniors who ask if I can rent out my house in a single-family neighborhood because I can't maintain it anymore. And I need my child to live in the accessory unit or whatever I create out of this single-family home. So it would be far more convenient for those demographics to live near the town center where they have a train station, where there's robust bus service, there's retail nearby, there's health services nearby, but we are not allowing more than 2 stories in that piece between Barnum Avenue and Paradise Green, which may not work, for the density that we are looking for investing in transit. No, I mean, we have the TOD overlay to the south, but anything to the north, I have the map here at the end. I created a map here. Yes, the color-coded map, and the TOD boundary ends at the street. And then after that, all you see is 2-story buildings because it's more, it's RM1, but you don't see more density there. And the village district would not just accommodate residential like RM1, but it would have a combination of ground floor retail, active retail uses, and then upper floor residential uses. And I'm so glad that we have interested, you may not be in support of it, you may be in support of it, but at least you've come here, which I appreciate. And that's the first step in planning. We need to have a community dialogue. And this is an initial thought. Please email me with your thoughts if you think this is a good option, if you have an alternative suggestion for this. And I will, develop a concept based on your thoughts, and I will communicate it to the commission as well. Mm-hmm.
I need a visual help.
Yes.
The map that we have here, the dotted line is the existing?
That's the existing TOD overlay district right now.
Okay. And anything that you added color to?
That is the underlying existing zoning.
Okay.
So if,
Where
for example,
are you expanding it?
So is this the actual proposed?
there is no proposal here. It's what exists right now. I haven't touched anything here to show what we're trying to do here, because I'm myself not sure what we're trying to do here. This is an initial dialogue. I want to hear from you
So
if you're okay with me
the
proposing
current
over.
dotted line is the current Todd.
Yes.
There is no, what you're suggesting here is existing, this is totally existing zoning.
Yes.
Outside of the Todd.
Right.
Yes.
Or even with, it's an overlay.
It's an overlay. I mean,
Todd overlay on the existing zoning.
Now,
Thank you.
what your thoughts are is where you have that little blue that says GF at the top.
CF.
That's a C?
Uh-huh.
Okay. I believe you. You're looking at taking that up Main
To
Street
Paradise Green.
to Paradise Green. So that is the thought.
And also I'm sorry to interrupt, and also in future, look at other commercial corridors in the town, if the village district works like a good pilot.
My suggestion is to have public forums or public meetings, not just the planning commission, but certainly the planning commission could be the impetus to set up meetings, but especially meetings in the Wilcoxon area, the Worcester area, or other areas where you want to extend this village district. That would be my suggestion, not just.
I
bring it-
completely agree with you, and that's why, when this proposal was initially written like 2 years ago by Jay, he put together a draft work program, and that I attached along with the map. The second page is the draft work program. And at that time, the draft work program was in January to conduct a stakeholder interview in February to do an advisory committee meeting. In March, research similar zoning regulations and design guidelines and hold a public informational meeting, and then begin developing regulations. In May, again, have public outreach sessions. In June, draft the core village district regulations, and in July, present the draft to the Stratford Planning Commission and Zoning Commission, and in July to August, finalize the regulations. So I want to take the same timeline, but do it for 2020. And, you know, could be a little faster than July or August, and we need to figure out the pace based on our other projects' workload. But I think I like what we have as a setup initially. And then we also have a list of stakeholder questions that we have enclosed behind the schedule, which please take a look at and let me know what your thoughts are. And I think, like you said, we should first have an initial conversation with the neighborhood folks, and I'll try to reach out to the neighborhood sometime in January to arrange an initial public meeting to know their thoughts,
Yeah.
come back,
Yeah.
and then start the process.
Yeah, I would suggest in early on, you know, you say here stakeholder interview meeting. You don't know who the stakeholders are.
So start with the initial meeting, yeah.
Yeah,
I agree
the
with
public
you.
hearing to find who the stakeholders are
Yeah.
and find, you know, who people, because then in February you have the advisory committee, which really should come from the people who come to the meeting, you know, because they have an interest, obviously, because they came to the meeting. To set up an advisory meeting without a public hearing, I think you'd be falling down in some of our past activities and programs, that we haven't gotten the public involved before we decide what we're going to do.
Okay, I would not do that now that you have told me clearly. And, you know, if any of you in the audience are interested to be a liaison for this and reach out to your neighbors, please connect with me and we can move it forward.
Other than that couple of changes, I don't see any rationale not to at least discuss it. You know, and
Because it's like we are trying to put our infrastructure in place before we put our investment, I mean, infrastructure and investments are the same, but before we actually see the growth that we want to see in the town. So now that our complete streets will start kicking off in, like, by next year, 2020 end or 2021, we have to start looking beyond Barnum Avenue, and the most logical place to look at is from Barnum Avenue intersection to Paradise Green. And we've done this in the past, this kind of, I have done this in the past, this kind of zoning overlays for other municipalities, and it's not a novice concept that I'm introducing here.
And you might also consider what to do with Barnum Avenue and Barnum Avenue Extension.
That's a good idea, too. I mean, I think they should be considered because there is so much potential. Even if we can reimagine Barnum Avenue as a two-story street, it's on all fronts. It's profitable for the developers, it's good for the transit, it's good for the town, you know, in terms of affordable housing, economic development. But I want to, you know, I don't want to, you know, put it out there for everyone and defeat the purpose. First to phase one, Barnum to Paradise, phase two, then see if we can extend the same overlay to other parts of Barnum Avenue.
I would just make it clear that that is phase two.
Yeah,
You know, that
phase two.
that you're thinking about
Yes,
doing that, so you know, people understand that we're not just looking at one area of town, we're looking at several areas of town. But those are, and if there are any other places that you deem as potential, I would bring it up early on and let people have input into it.
sure, I'll do it.
So, is your red light on for a reason, Mr. Watson?
No?
Do you want anybody from the audience to come and comment, because they've been here?
We can, if anybody would like to make a comment, we're not used to having people here, so we don't know what to do. No, I'm kidding. If anybody would just like to come up and make a comment about tonight's adventure or future adventures, please come on up. Otherwise, we'll get very close to, I would just like to say this is probably my last meeting because I'm not going to be here in December.
Really?
So, Mr. Vigliotti, I'm just giving you a warning. But I'd like to congratulate you on moving forward, or backwards, I'm not sure which, to the Zoning Commission. Condolences, or congratulations. And Mr. Watson is going to be here.
Let me just make sure, do not forget us. You will think of us every week.
Oh,
And I would like to, actually, she's coming to the microphone now to introduce who will be Mr. Vigliotti's replacement,
Hi.
Christina Kazanis.
Hi, Christina Kazanis, 1 East Street. How you doing? Kazanas. Okay. Hi, I just wanted to say hello and thank you so much for the presentation. I just want to say two things. One, I'm really looking forward to joining this body in January and continuing doing the good work that you guys have been doing. And I also just want to say that both as a former employee of Town Hall and former public servant and as a resident, it is incredibly exciting to see so much of what got started so long ago starting to come to fruition. It gives me a lot of joy and it gives me a lot of good feelings to know that when I moved here, I did so knowing that there were all of these incredible projects that were starting to move forward, and now it's just really great to see that what a good decision it was for me to buy a house here, because good things are happening here, and I just wanted to thank you for your work. So. Great.
Thank you for your comments and good luck in your new position. And
may I talk for 1 minute? Sorry to interrupt, and this is my last speech for Pat, I think, because I didn't know she's not going to be here in December. Otherwise, I would have had a huge thank you note for her. And Mr. Vigliotti, who, you kept our commission intact on the point and made us make some important decisions this past year. I'm incredibly grateful for your public service, and I'm sure the town would appreciate it too. I mean, we all appreciate your time, your efforts, the amount of detail you put into your research. We've got so much done. The digital sign ordinance moved forward, parking regulations moved forward, our text amendments, like 3.14, that moved forward, and we did quite a few subdivision approvals together. Our complete streets is almost coming to, an engineering design. Our greenways project is, in phase 2, and we're going to start phase 3. Our coastal resiliency grants are kicking off. It's a great time. You're leaving us in a better place. And I hope we continue the baton with Christina here. And I've heard some great things about Christina too from my co-workers, and I'm so excited to have you here. I'm equally sad that I'm going to lose two good commissioners this time, but I hope you move forward in more public service. Thank you very much for your service.
Thank you very much. One thing I would say, we also got a town planner.
Yes. And thank you, a big thank you for that.
That was great.
That's what I wanted to tell you.
Another.
And another speaker, yes. Stephanie Phillips, 41 Yarwood. I wanted to thank you all as well, and to tell you that I believe this commission has done outstanding accomplishments, which often in a town of this size, the Planning Commission isn't well noted and doesn't realize how hard and how much work that you do and how it all begins here. To Mr. Vigliotti, especially to Pat Patuski, you two have done an incredible job of moving this town forward. And I look forward to both Christina and Harold and the other members to move that forward. One of the things that I think you really have benefited from, and I hope somebody documents this, that as a member of the Zoning Commission and a former chairman, we advocated, and I personally advocated it very hard to get a planner. And the difference between having a planner on staff and not having a planner is remarkable. So I want to thank you very much, because you've proven every point of why we needed a planner and why not having a planner hurt us and slowed our growth in what we can do now. The other thing I also wanted to mention, I am very much interested in seeing what happens with the TOD in those lines. I was fortunate enough to be a part of it when it first started, way before it had another name, and I'd like to see the opportunities in it. There are a lot of good things that you mentioned in your vision of where those lines are going that I agree with, and like to see that, you know, we can come together and try to see what we can do to build that kind of opportunity. And the final thing that, besides saying goodbye to everyone and so forth, is on the zoning, as my last meeting is coming up in a couple of weeks, we have one last issue on the zoning agenda, is the sign proposals that you all,
Digital
electronic signs, that you have put forward to the zoning commission, which is still being sort of bounced around in our commission. I would be thrilled to invite you all to our meeting, I think it's December 14th, to help bring your perspectives, because we've been going back and forth about how that regulation might be instituted and the effect it's going to have. And I think having the Planning Commission there to understand your thought process is very important. We did have Chairman Petusky there that one meeting that helped a lot, but I think that there's still more questions that folks might have, and understanding the hard work that you've already done and the research is helpful so that we don't try to reinvent the wheel. And I think even Samitha had put a lot of work into that effort. You did all the research to find other signs, and we're getting caught in the weeds a little bit. So
I think it was more than me, John Staley, who took the time to go to Old Saybrook, take pictures, interview the zoning enforcement officer there. It would be worth having John Staley definitely at your commission meeting.
then I hope you could, I don't
I
have
would
him
let
here,
him
but if you
know.
could, let him know, because I invite him. It is something that I see that as a legacy of this commission is a very good one among all the other listed things that you have.
Yes.
And I hope that both Mr. Vigliardi and Pat Petusky will be involved in other ways. What was that, Harold?
I believe it's the 11th.
The 11th? It's a Wednesday. Thank you.
It's December 11th.
Gail always knows. She keeps us in line. Yeah. You got to talk to the real boss here, you know? But thank you all, and I think that you're going out on a high note, and you should feel very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, hopefully.
Thank you.
I just want to, Mr. Watson, you want to say something?
I just want to say I'm brokenhearted. This has been one of the nicest committees that I've ever sat on for anything. That it's been a pleasure. You have been a fabulous chairperson for us. I have looked every month forward to this meeting because everybody involved with it has done honest work trying to get things done and make things better. And it's tough to think of the future, but we will work towards the same accomplishments. So thank you, Pat.
I'm sure you
Thank you.
will. I wish Mr. Staley and Mr. Senf were here, because I would also like to thank them very much. They were two new members along with Mr. Watson, and they made my job much easier, and I hope next month you can express my thanks to them. And I would also like to thank you, Mr. Watson and Mr. Vigliotti, for really doing a great job in researching things and keeping on top of things and giving us your input. And of course, I want to thank our Secretary, Gail, who every month came here. A lot of hard work.
She sits in the midnight
Yeah.
and writes the meeting
And she
minutes.
does all the minutes, but she also keeps me out of trouble when we get to the public hearings as to what we do. And Susmitha, thank you also very much for your kind words, but also to all the hard work that you have done and to keep us on the straight and narrow and getting things accomplished, because that's because of your assistance we've been able to get a lot accomplished, and I appreciate it.
Thank
And
you.
I wish you luck. I'm going to go travel now. But thank you all very, very much, and thank you all for coming to my last meeting. I appreciate that. I didn't realize I had a going away crowd, but I'm sure you're not here for that. But anyway, I'd like to adjourn, but I do need a motion.
I move that we close our November meeting.
Second?
Oh, that one? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you all for coming. Have a good evening.